What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Broad and Shakedown. It's been a while since we've been here, but we're back to talk about some shit. Some non-important stuff, some really important stuff.
Well, too bad. You don't get to pick what we talk about. This is our fucking podcast, and I'm going to talk whatever the fuck I want to about. And now I'm back. We're ready to start putting out some content, finally. This is going exactly how I thought it would so far.
Yeah. All right, let's just jump right into it.
Yeah. No more bullshit. It's late.
Yeah, we're actually recording like past midnight right now, so.
And our good friend Brendan has been kind enough to join us today because we're going to be talking a little politics, everybody's favorite subject. Bender's a really smart guy. He's always right, so just listen to every word he says.
Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little something special about yourself.
Yeah, how's it going, guys? My name's Brendan. I'm a metals, jewelry, and CAD/CAM major at Tyler School of Art, mostly focusing in product design. But my main hobbies include playing music. I'm an extreme
All right, no one gives a shit. All right, let's move on.
Not the Brendan Clark podcast.
Yeah, who the fuck asked you to talk about yourself?
Be.
All right, so first story we're going to talk about. This is a pretty big story in the news. You might have heard of it. So as you know, Tesla, on their new models, they have a self-driving feature. And some guy or some woman was actually driving, I think in Arizona. And, she was doing the self-driving thing. It was pitch black out late at night, and she was driving down the road, and all of a sudden she hit a biker. I guess she didn't hit the biker. Her car hit a biker. And so now that incident has basically spawned into a conversation on, are these self-driving cars safe, or are they something that we should introduce on a mass scale, or was Tesla kind of just like testing the waters on this, and now we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and start over?
Well, obviously we don't have the technology perfected yet, so I think like something like this was bound to happen. Honestly, the machines are going to kill us all anyway. I think this might be like their subtle way of like, their malfunction. I think maybe the Tesla had a mind of its own and did it on purpose, potentially. But,
you think the Tesla was programmed to kill?
I don't think it was programmed to kill, but maybe just not to spare.
Maybe Elon Musk isn't a great person.
No, because think about it. He believes that all of this is like a simulation, and it would make sense, right? Because if it's a simulation, he's winning. If it's just a video game, if this is just a really complex version of The Sims.
Oh yeah.
Think about it, the guy makes sick cars and rocket ships for a living and bangs supermodels.
I guess whoever has him as a character is winning in this video game.
Yeah, he's like the guy in Fortnite with the spacesuit. No,
yeah.
Yeah.
Technically be PUBG because someone was driving.
It'd be what? PUBG?
Player Unknown Battleground.
I had no idea what that acronym was, but I'm glad you clarified.
Most people do.
Yeah, I was never big into video games, but Fortnite's an exception.
But back to the self-driving cars.
Yeah.
One thing I want to discuss is this a plausible thing? So I want to compare it to Google Glass. Google Glass had all these incredible features, and a lot of people thought that it was going to be the next big thing, bigger than the Apple Watch, bigger than really any other sort of iPhone device or, again, watch that you could control, your media, your messaging, stuff like that.
Is Google Glass, it's the glasses where you
Yes.
can have basically a
Yes.
desktop computer on your glasses?
And it never took off for one main reason. People didn't want to wear it on their face. Comparing that to self-driving cars, if everyone used self-driving cars, I firmly believe, and statistics show, that it'd be safer. Cars could drive faster because you can take out human error, so they can push the speed limit.
How can you say it would be safer looking at an incident like this, though?
Well, it's only been one. If I remember correctly, a couple years ago, Google tested their own self-driving cars, and I can't remember the exact number, so sorry for not knowing the exact statistics, but I do remember seeing a six-figure digit in mileage without having anything outside of a minor fender bender, which was the other driver's fault.
So basically what you're saying is if you take the number of fatal crashes or crashes at all within self-driving cars and compare them to cars that are operated by humans, that the human error is much worse than the computer error.
Significantly. This is the first, from what we know of, fatal incident involving a self-driving car. But here's why I think it'll never take off. Despite all the positives of self-driving cars, people enjoy driving.
Oh, yeah. I love driving.
American culture, like a lot of it revolves around cars. It's a very American thing, whether it's manufacturing them or a father teaching his son how to do an oil change in their garage. People love driving. So I don't think we will ever get to, anywhere even close to 100% of self-driving cars on the road. And if it's not going to get that high, I don't see why we keep pushing it. Maybe I could see us making public transportation more self-driving.
Although there is a market for it. Yeah, Americans in general love to drive, but there are so many people that when they have like a 10-hour drive ahead of them would much rather pass out in the driver's seat than have to drink copious amounts of caffeine and listen to NPR to stay awake, you know.
Exactly. But
Oh
again,
man, you give me like an Adderall and roast up a nice blunt in the front seat, I could drive for 17 hours straight.
well, how do you think this could turn into possibly regulations? Like, do you think the government would ever interfere in this kind of thing?
I think it's going to be a compromise eventually. I think like if anything, it's going to be a feature. Like people are going to want to drive, but sometimes you don't feel like driving. And think about it. Imagine if like you didn't plan on having anything to drink and you end up this happens to me all the time because after I have 5 beers, like then I have 10. It's something about that fifth beer threshold. And like say like I drove, I have that option now where like I mean that would take like Uber off of.
I mean, it would still be illegal to sit behind in a driver's seat while you're drunk, even if it's a self-driving car, because you still need to operate the car to park. You still need to operate the car to do a lot of things. I think the self-driving feature is only when you're on a singular road, and because it doesn't take exits on the highway for you, you know.
Well, I think one of the things that they're trying to push with self-driving cars is the concept of you don't need to worry about getting home. To the point, if you're functional enough that you can plug in an address of where you need to get to on a night out, you drink as much as you want. Again, as long as you're sober enough that you can get an address into your phone, you hop in your car and it takes you right home.
So you think the self-driving car market is basically they're trying to target people who want to get fucked up and be able to drive home?
I don't think they're all trying to target that. I just think that is an obvious feature that some people would pursue. Now, I don't think anyone's going to buy one with the sole purpose of, oh, now I have this option for getting fucked up. But I just think that's clearly something that I would think a company like, with Elon Musk would try to pursue and add sort of different ways to go into that.
Yeah, I think like, but the one thing is though is like everything that they invent that has like these good intentions, it always ends up getting abused, at least in like the short term.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the government would ever regulate something based off one specific instance like this. And I think the reason this is getting so much media attention is because we've never had anything like this. Well, we've never had a crash like that, but one specifically from a self-driving car, because self-driving cars have only been around for what, 2 years at the maximum? Maybe 1 year in the public sphere.
I think it's been a little longer, but definitely
like prototypes
like
and shit.
Yeah.
I can't imagine a prototype going back further than 10 years.
Yeah, no way. I mean, I think it was probably around like 10 years ago where the self-parking cars started, like Cadillac was doing it. I think maybe like some of the more expensive Buick models might have been doing it.
Well, that brings up another issue with self-driving cars, the ability of them to be hacked. We've seen multiple news sources test this with hackers, and I've seen on television, again, forgive me for not remembering the exact news source, but I've seen journalists work with a hacker and then get in a car that has the auto parking, which is connected through an internet, and they've been hacked to the point where they're driving down a freeway and a guy in some whatever location can turn off their engine. And that was a huge news story a couple years ago.
That's actually wild.
So if you have a self-driving car, if it's connected to any sort of internet or Bluetooth or whatever, satellite, you run the ability of it being hacked. And that causes a whole nother issue. There are people who will never buy one just because of that. I honestly don't think I would.
Oh, I don't trust anybody. And like I am so bad with like technology and shit like that, so I'd be such a sitting duck. Yeah, I'd probably like never do it. Like knowing that. you guys know me well. You know, like my stance on technology. I think it's moving way too fast for our own good, and we don't know how to handle it. And I don't know. Like this could be like Skynet, like in real life. But.
Did you hear Stephen Hawking? How he died a week ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
R.I.P.
Yeah, but before his death, he put out a final paper like 2 weeks before he died, and he laid out how he thinks the end of humanity will come about. And I didn't read the entire thing, but I read like a summary of it. And he says that technology is going to play a vital part in the demise of humanity as a whole.
It's so weird that like everyone, like when they hear that, they're like, yeah, that's how it's all gonna end. That's what like this goes in like a whole other deeper issue with me is like I think that there are forces at work that whether it's their specific goal, it might be like a soft goal. I think they're really trying to make people complacent and just like consume and blissfully
Who?
just the public in general.
Wait, who's trying to make people complacent?
I don't know. That's the thing, but like
is it like technology companies?
It could be like a multiple like different sources. It might not just be one, but I definitely think that like whether it's their intention or not, it might be like not their hard goal, but their soft goal to make the masses complacent and not give a shit. Because like, could you imagine that?
An argument against that would be when you look at like Twitter or Facebook or all these social media companies, these like massive companies,
You mean smoking for the soul?
Well, no, when they always push these social movements, and they always push when you go onto the trending page, you always see these movements that are happening, and they're basically propagating these movements. And so if they want you to be like desensitized, or they want to like distract you from what's going on in the world, why would they do that?
Well, another thing too is I think they also might be like as a way to get people to ignore how many things are like fucked up and how much freedom we're losing like literally like every day. I think one of the ways now, like we have very easy access, and it's actually designed in a way for us to kind of form like Joe Rogan always talks about it as like tribalism. Like everybody, like you find all these people, you could very easily find people who are exactly like you and believe in all the same things as you, and you get that reinforcement and you start thinking that you're always right. And if like we're all fighting it out among each other, I think like there might be forces at work, either like in business or social media companies, government, whatever, maybe a little bit of everything that like that, but they need to keep us civil enough so like we don't ever like try to check their power. Like,
so do you think?
I know I'm sounding like Alex Jones right now.
No. Do you think social media companies or tech companies are trying to polarize our politics to keep us arguing and to keep us from seeing what's really going on?
Benner, I'd like to hear what you have to say about this.
I don't even think, forget the fact that maybe you have individual people or corporations trying to push polarization, but what the internet itself has done is connected the world. A lot of good things come from that, but also a lot of bad things. But the main thing that I want to hone in on is the internet gives you a sense of community. I think Bill Burr, one of my favorite comedians, made a joke one time in this premise, basically saying, like, you could have some hobby. Maybe that hobby is baseball. And you can go on the internet and find millions of people who love baseball, and now you have a little group. Or you could have another hobby, something a little more sinister and weird, like maybe you want to fuck a pig. And then if the internet didn't exist, you think, oh man,
you can find at least 100 pig fuckers.
Well, yeah.
Easy.
Oh yeah.
If the internet didn't
in Reddit,
exist,
there's definitely a subreddit for that.
You probably
subreddit for everything.
You probably sit in your room like, man, I'm probably the only guy who wants to fuck a pig. I should just never mention this to anyone ever. But now that you have the internet and the ability of like pure animosity, you can now find, again, like you said, probably at least 100 people just in America who want to fuck a pig.
Are you coming out to us as a pig fucker?
That's a different topic.
Okay.
But basically, now you have a group. And now you feel a part of something. And that general feeling is a great feeling. It's actually something that human beings strive for. Like you mentioned, being tribal. So now, whether it be baseball fans or pig fuckers, they have their tribe. And again, it's great when people are connecting over baseball or over, maybe even a political issue or, baking cakes. But it's really bad when you have people connecting over terrorism or, way more sinister things even than that. Even things that are less so sinister. It's people feel like, and I think this was a huge part, not to get too much into politics, of the Trump campaign. Trump himself acted like the internet, where he had said a lot of these racist, xenophobic things. People all the time sort of just kept them inside and never said them, but now they see a guy saying it and they feel more comfortable sharing that. I think that's generally what the internet does.
Let's talk about like our boy Donald, and not so much about like just like the political aspect, but like the Trump effect and like how so many things have changed just in these past 2 years. The more and more I meditate on it, I think that Trump is more of the effect. Like Trump was a result of forces that have long been at work. And I think that like we're almost like on a crash course for two particular like endings. One being potentially good, one being really bad, but each would result in a cosmic shift of like global society. I think that technology is growing at such a rate that it'll almost be impossible for the government and corporations to keep people dumb. They've lost control.
What's their incentive to keep people dumb?
Because dumb people don't worry about bigger issues. They're worried about what fucking Netflix show they're going to watch today, what sweet game they just downloaded on their phone, and how many likes a picture of their fucking ass gets on Instagram. I'm not saying that to be sexist, because guys do the same thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, think about it. Like, I don't know. I'm a hypocrite because I do this all the time. But, like, I don't know. I just feel like it's keeping people from, like, living in the real world. It's like, well, oh, there's this beautiful girl that I know, and I'd love to go talk to her, like meet her, maybe ask her on a date, but I got 100 million XNXX videos, or just like I could look at a million pictures of hot girls that I follow on Instagram. Like,
Wait, so are you saying that it's keeping people from being productive in their own lives, or it's keeping people from paying attention to like global issues, like political issues that of like great importance?
yeah, I think like there's a lot like more like readily available and simple, less stressful things to think about and concern themselves with, and like social media in a lot of cases like is able to do that.
Well, I think a counterpoint to that would be, well, just look at, the Arab Spring happened 2011. Was that when it happened?
2008, I think, right?
Okay, around there. Well, basically the
2012.
entire thing spawned out of Twitter. The amount of people that, and you can tell that because if you look at where the protests were happening, all of the protests were happening in Wi-Fi hotspots. Like where people, that's where everybody gathered. And that's what basically helped them overthrow their corrupt government.
I'm not like somebody. I think that the internet and like technology and social media definitely has benefits. I mean, like, it goes without saying. I just feel like there's a lot now, like the mainstream social media that people use the most is somewhat toxic. I mean, I have a lot to be grateful for when it comes to the internet. Like, I like just through like YouTube and like podcasts, like there's so many opportunities to like learn stuff and educate yourself and like be like entertained and like get something out of it. Like think about it, like no matter what you're into, like if you're like a musician, like Ben, you play guitar, like you're a lot better than me. Like I play a little bit, but like you could, any fucking song you've ever heard of, you could go on Ultimate Guitar and learn how to play it that day. Like,
oh, it's unbelievable when you listen to these gods of guitar playing from the 50s, 60s, 70s through the 80s and 90s. the way they learned was, they had a guitar and then they heard a song on the radio. They had to, drive themselves or get their parents to take them to the record store, shell out $20 for that record that had the song on it, and play
I don't know if
it.
it'd be $20 back then. Records were very cheap.
Whatever
back
it
then,
would
yeah.
have been. I don't know. That's what they are nowadays. And
Yeah.
you'd have to buy that physical record and have a turntable, and they would literally sit there and play it. And they would force themselves to learn by ear. I mean, if they didn't have a teacher, there was no internet to look up guitar tabs. There wasn't any, connected access to other people who already knew the song, like, oh, try this, try that, unless you actually knew the person and could call them on a landline. So I think in some ways that made them better guitar players because they forced themselves to learn by ear. But nowadays, you can learn things quicker. Seriously, through my Ultimate Guitar app, I can be listening to a song on my phone. Let's say it's a Jimi Hendrix song, right? Like, man, I really want to learn that. I literally just keep the song playing, open the app, and just play Playing Now. And it reads the song that is currently playing on my phone and gives me anywhere from minimum 4 or 5 to dozens of tab versions of that song. And now I can learn it and I can read it. So that is another thing that I think is really interesting about how the internet has sort of woven its way into our society. We can do things faster without question, but is it always better? And that goes back to your point, is technology moving too fast? Now, obviously, if people are becoming as good of guitar players as they used to be, is not a huge deal that's going to affect society.
But people are also learning how to build bombs at a rate that they couldn't have before the internet. People are getting connected with these terrorist groups and, kind of like white nationalist groups in the U.S., for instance. And so, yeah, there are upsides to an increase in technology, but there's also the downside where you're connecting people who otherwise wouldn't be connected, who share awful views. And once they see that, oh, other people think the same thing as me, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe this is kind of a normal thing to think. People who otherwise would stay completely quiet about their bigoted views in their community because they didn't want to be ostracized are now meeting up through social media and eventually in person because they have that ability now.
And not only that, it's the best recorder of history that we've ever had. Things that are on the internet, they stay on the internet, and they can come back to bite you. Staying in politics...
Are you going to bring up Trump tweets? Because the funny thing is...
Yeah, even in Trump tweets, obviously he said some things and looks contradicting, but one thing that I always think about...
Just a little bit.
is one thing I always think about now is the reaction of Democrats and the left wing when Trump won. There were protests. There were people who were threatening his life. People like, what was it, Kathy Griffith or whatever, the comedian who had the photo shoot holding, the fake Trump head.
She's washed up. She fucking sucks.
But even then...
Well, there was also Madonna at the Women's March the day after his inauguration saying she was thinking...
Let's burn the White House down.
No, she said she was going to blow up the White House.
So you have all these things, and Republicans can condemn that, which I do think they should. As much as I strongly dislike the guy, I'm not for anyone being killed over any of this. When Obama won, you saw the same thing, if not even more. Now, maybe that had to do a little bit more with race, but you saw protest. You saw, sort of Obama-like piñatas being hung from trees by their necks. You saw people saying, blatantly racist things. So one thing the internet does is, yeah, you can make a strong argument that Trump winning the presidency actually had a more detrimental effect on society than Obama. And you can make the argument that Obama winning was more of a general overreaction by people, where maybe, Trump winning actually really kind of tapped into something that people were feeling. But people will just see what Democrats are saying about Trump, or people who vote Democrat, like Obama, like Kathy Griffith, and then they just see that Republicans did the same exact thing back in 2008.
Yeah, there were people back in 2008 that were saying outrageous things like, oh, I'm going to hang Obama, or lynch him. But And there are people on the left saying awful things about Trump now. But in terms of the strategic organization of protests, I would say that the protests and the movements against the Trump regime or administration, whatever, are much more organized and structured than the ones against Obama and are happening on a scale that's astronomically larger than they were in '08.
Without a doubt.
And I think that goes into the fact that, social media, it has a lot more influence on us now in 2016 than it did back in '08. And so people are much more capable of organizing with like-minded people. But I also think while technology did play a big part in that, I think there's a lot more resentment towards Trump now than there was in, say, '09 or 2010 at the beginning of the Tea Party movement. I think there's a lot more resentment now than there was back then.
Especially when you look at the fact that there's currently a special counsel investigation into, the concept of Trump maybe colluding with Russia, that the least we know is that investigation is going to go on for a while longer, and it's going to continue to divide people, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because, again, I just genuinely hope that through this investigation, we get the truth.
Well, that's the thing, and I've heard this said a million times, and I couldn't agree more. I think one of the best things that could happen if there was no collusion, the second best thing that could happen would be if there let's say hypothetically there was, that people who support him take their lumps. It's kind of like think about towards the end of the Nixon administration. Everyone was this guy's a paranoid crazy man and needs to go on both sides, and the Republicans knew that it was a sinking ship and they didn't want to attach themselves to it. The worst thing that could happen, this is my biggest fear, is, and I've seen this written a million times, I'm not breaking any new ground here, is if there's clear collusion, he's guilty as fuck, and it doesn't matter. The people who support him will just say it's a big liberal conspiracy.
That will definitely happen.
That'll happen, but I don't think that matters at all. I was watching some political strategist on, I think it was CNN the other day, and he had been around since the Nixon administration, and he said that what Trump has done by calling out Mueller by name in his tweets, he's done more to obstruct justice than Nixon ever did.
That argument could definitely be made.
And because Nixon never called anyone out by name. He never said, I don't know the guy's name who was running the investigation into the Watergate investigation, but he never called him out by name and questioned his credibility. And that's what Trump is doing. He's literally launching an attack on the person who's investigating him.
You could also make the argument, though, that Nixon didn't have the platform to do such a thing.
Yeah, and which ties back into technology.
And the internet.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's the other thing. When Nixon, technically he resigned, he would have been impeached. When that happened, similar to I mentioned before, people can find their tribes on the internet. If, the investigation comes out, something clearly happened, and Trump's going to get in a lot of trouble, by him attacking Mueller by name, and by Republican, other Republican lawmakers, whether it be, Mike Pence, Paul Ryan, anyone else in the House or Senate, or people that really matter, when Nixon resigned, there wasn't a platform for everyday people living in small town Arkansas or even in, urban New York to really have their voices heard unless they went to town halls, unless they went to letters, unless they wrote letters, or unless they went to rallies. Now, what I worry is you do have a faction of Trump's base that I am more than positive, if it comes out that he colluded with Russia, even if he killed a man, they will not leave his side. These people have Twitter, they have Facebook, and they can continue to propel those opinions and ideas, and Republicans who are also in office need to worry about their votes still.
That thing you just said, Trump fucking said that. He said, I could kill somebody in the middle of the street. They'd still vote for me.
Yeah, and that was Honestly, it might be the most true thing he's ever said.
So I want your honest reaction. What do you think would happen if Trump was impeached and taken out of office? Like what do you think his supporters would do?
I truly believe on a very small scale, I don't think it'd be anything huge, nothing that's going to actually tear our country apart. People would die. I really do think there are people that support him. Remember, like, these are people who have guns. These aren't far left wing liberals who all they do is smoke weed all day and that's sort of like, stereotype of like some hippie liberal. These are people who live in the backwoods of Alabama and Mississippi and West Virginia, and they have guns and they have racist beliefs, they have racist tendencies, and now that this man that they truly held up for whatever reason to a, deity status is being impeached, and he made them believe that it's all fake and they're just out to get them. And I truly
Who would they go after though? Like who would die?
That's what I wonder. Again, I'm not saying thousands of people are going to die. I'm talking about like maybe a dozen.
But so you don't think there would be mass organized protests?
There would definitely be mass organized protests, but I'm more than confident, again, in a small handful of situations, those protests could turn deadly.
And I've seen memes. I spend a little bit of time on like alt-right Reddit pages and Facebook pages and Trump supporter Facebook pages just to kind of take in like what conversations are being had. And there are a lot of memes. I don't know if they're joking, but a lot of memes saying the second that Congress votes to impeach Trump, they're taking up arms. And I don't know what they mean by that. I don't know who they're taking up arms against. But these memes get like thousands of retweets. And I think most people are probably joking when they...
Yeah, I think it's like when you look at how many people say, oh, I'm going to move to Canada if Obama's elected or if Trump's elected, and how many people actually move to Canada.
A large amount, actually. There was a pretty large exodus of people when Trump got elected.
I still think you have well over 90% of people who said, oh, I'm going to move to Canada. They didn't actually move. They probably didn't even move down the street.
Yeah, okay.
So out of the thousands of people that liked or retweeted these memes, I don't think every single one of those people is going to pick up a gun and start marching towards Washington or whatever their goal may be. But like I said, I agree with you. There is this group of people out there who are that dedicated to Donald Trump and this cause and who have been brainwashed into thinking that everyone in the world is out to get him. And I truly believe they would pick up a gun and do something.
Well,
about it.
You know what I could see happening? I could see a huge protest in D.C., a pro-Trump protest if he were impeached. And of course, there's no open carry laws in D.C.
Like you're bigger than his inauguration, crowd-wise.
That was huge, but
biggest of all time.
Ever.
But I can see
tape,
I can see people bringing weapons to that protest, police interfering, obviously because it's against the law, and I can see a scuffle breaking out. And when a police officer fires a shot at someone, I think a majority of people in that crowd would view that as a corrupt government who just impeached our Lord and Savior is now trying to take out his supporters. And they could revolt against the cops, making it like a kind of mass murder scenario. Obviously, that's far off, but...
They are putting themselves in their own worst fear of why they want to keep the Second Amendment, that a tyrannical government is coming to take their guns away. And they are now, again, from their crazy brainwashed beliefs, it never would have been an issue, but because they bring the guns to Washington and they get in this scuffle, which again, this might not happen.
Totally hypothetical.
We're just theorizing this, but I really don't think this scenario is out of the question, which is why we're talking about it. Now,
isn't it crazy that we're talking about this though?
Yeah.
It's like,
in realistic
totally
terms.
fucking happen.
Absolutely. And I don't want
All
to
out
hear
war on the White House lawn.
People try to say, oh,
Give it 2 years.
it's all the same on both sides. I hate those people who just play the middle in politics. I'm sorry. If Barack Obama colluded with Russia and, got investigated or whatever, and then was impeached, whether he was impeached for whatever other reason, I highly doubt you have hundreds or thousands of Democratic voters picking up guns, which again, they're statistically less likely to have, and marching in Washington. Mostly because I believe Democratic voters, let's say Hillary did win, and let's say all that bullshit about Benghazi, was true and is as bad as Republicans said it was. Let's say she does get impeached over that. I personally would not, be brainwashed into thinking that Hillary Clinton is the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Well,
Yeah.
You're dealing with people. I mean, they're going to be freaked out. It's a fear response. These people have felt disenfranchised for a long time, and it's largely the Republican Party and conservative media's fault. It's been years of this. So this goes back to my point that Trump is part of the effect, not the cause.
Oh, I would kind of disagree.
Trump, the man, does not scare me. He's pretty ineffective.
No, but he's had a huge influence on people. And when I say that, just think about if George W. Bush wasn't impeached. I do not think that there would be people taking up arms and going to, because he wasn't a conservative godsend. But people love Trump even more than Ronald Reagan was loved. And I think that there's a huge crowd of people in America that were politically inactive, and they were suddenly activated by Trump, and they have minimal knowledge of how the government works and the proceedings of how things work, and they would see it as literally their country is being stolen from them.
Two things going off of that. I mean, Bill Clinton was investigated for all that, and he was technically impeached, if I remember.
He was
correctly.
impeached, yes.
He
wasn't
convicted.
convicted.
He was never convicted and removed from office. People didn't, march and carry guns over that. And that's because, though Bill Clinton was an extremely popular president, and so was Ronald Reagan, so was Barack Obama, especially at the end of his term, it's not about how many people love Trump. Because that is actually now, again, somewhere around 36, 38%, very small faction.
Which is crazy.
A very small faction of our voting population. It's not about how many people love Trump. It's about how much those people that love him. And they are so attached to him.
Don't you find it crazy, though, that even if Trump had a 20% approval rating, that he could still theoretically win a second term?
Yeah.
He would need help from Russia again.
Russia didn't help. Like, that's another big misconception, is how much Russia helped. Like, I mean...
I think they had a huge influence.
I think they had a huge influence.
See, I disagree. I really think that collusion or not, and if there was, like, Trump should 100% be impeached and removed from office. I think that part of like the liberal media tries to pump it up a little bit too much.
But you can literally look online at the impressions, and what I mean by impressions is the amount of times something had been clicked on the posts that were propagated on Russian pages. There were millions of people in America.
Not even Russian pages, Russian bots, which we know that it was a state-sponsored, organized motive of these Russian hackers, not even hackers, just people creating these fake profiles and these fake pages, sending out propaganda, not necessarily always supporting Trump, but just widening the divide. Because Russia knew, they were smart enough to know that Hillary was about as close as a centrist as I think you're going to get in politics. One of the reasons Bernie Sanders did so well is because he was so far left and he sort of awoken up that base. Russia was just trying to widen the divide, to create the distrust and the fear and the anger between the two sides of our political parties, because they knew the further they widened the gap, the more likely someone was to go towards Trump rather than a Marco Rubio or whoever else.
And that's genius if you think about it, because it made Hillary go out of her comfort zone. Because, like, Bill Clinton was basically a Republican. Like, in almost every single way. It's just that he had the Democratic label and like used that like rock star charisma, very similar to what Obama did. Actually, Obama was even like it's been measured through like different like studies that he was even more centrist than Clinton was.
But that's what annoys me about Obama. He campaigned on change and a very progressive platform, and then his policies were basically the opposite when he got into office.
To be fair, it's a majority of people would agree, even a lot of Republican voters, that, you know, with him going against an opposition House and Senate, they really did cockblock him a lot of the way. I mean, when you look at how Republicans went after Nancy Pelosi, at the time, the House Majority Leader, until they lost control of the House in 2010, they went after Nancy Pelosi almost more than they went after Obama. And they're, making it sound like she's a communist or a super far left socialist and making people hate her. Nancy Pelosi was instrumental in Dodd-Frank, in the Affordable Care Act, in saving the auto industry. Nancy Pelosi did a lot of amazing things. But the Republicans, a lot like what the Russian bots did, they created a divide between Democrats of ones who supported and loved Nancy Pelosi, and they made Democrats think that maybe Nancy Pelosi isn't the best. So what you recently saw in the special election in Pennsylvania, Josh Lambo or Lamb or whatever it was, he was a Democrat and he won, but he went on record as saying he's not just, a Nancy Pelosi Democrat, and he tried to distance himself. And because I think Democrats just kind of gave into that. So Republicans did the same thing. They tried to push a divide within the Democratic Party, and they sort of fractioned it off, and it was you're with Obama or you're with Pelosi or you're far left with someone like Sanders, and they created all of that turmoil within that one party, and I think that's part of the reason why Democrats struggled to get things done during the Obama administration.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, why do you think during the Democratic primary, Trump was sending out so many tweets saying how the nomination was being stolen by the Clinton campaign? He knew that, for one thing, Bernie would never win, because obviously we know now that it was a pretty rigged primary. And then the second thing he knew is that if he created a big enough stigma for the Clinton campaign, that would just help his chances in the general election. And it did tremendously. So a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters, not a lot, but a large minority, went from championing progressive causes to actually voting for Trump. It's a sad thing to say as like a Sanders voter myself, but they did that purely based on hatred of centrists and the establishment, whatever that is.
Trump is basically the American public saying, fuck you. And like, I kind of like, I feel almost stupid not seeing it coming more, like now in hindsight. But like, I feel like some of like the more educated people and like who like really truly understand American society were the ones like who knew that he was going to win.
Well, we were told throughout the entire campaign that there was no chance of him winning. He was mocked every single time I turned on the TV.
If you watch sports, you'd know, because like they said, it's about the same chance of an NFL kicker missing a 46-yard field goal. And
yeah, well, again, going back to the internet thing, one of the reasons people were so sure Hillary was going to win is you look at what 538 did. And they sort of projected all of these statistics that showed she had a 60% chance of winning, an 80%. It looked like a lock. The one thing that 538 couldn't account for is people didn't want to admit they were going to vote for Trump.
Although that people say that a lot, but it's not like you're coming clean to people you know. Like, you're just answering a phone and telling someone who you'll never have to see in real life that.
That's the thing, though. But that is the only way to explain these statistical anomalies that were Trump winning, outside of maybe like actual ballots got hacked, which I don't know if that actually happened.
No.
So there are definitely people who voted for Trump and wanted to and wouldn't tell anyone. Or they were even maybe so ashamed of it, they wouldn't answer it on anonymous polls, or they wouldn't answer it in person if someone was polling them. And I think that had a huge part of it. I think a lot of people made their decision on election day. Because, I mean, if there was one thing about the entire 2016 primary and general election, is there was not a half hour that was boring and lack of, excitement or entertainment or lack of news. Every single day, multiple times, there was some talking point and something that could maybe flip someone's mind. So I think when you have the fact that people were considering Trump but didn't feel like it was socially acceptable to support him, going off of you say it was kind of a fuck you vote and maybe they didn't want to know people they were doing that, with the ability to sort of have all being bombarded with all this news up until the day of the election, you have all these people that were sort of quelling that down in them and then made their decision on election day instead of in the 538 polls or the Quinnipiac polls or whatever.
A lot of it, I think, like had to do with the superficiality of like social media too. Like you were talking before about like Nancy Pelosi, like how like he was able, like she has all these accomplishments, and then she was able to he was able to turn so many people against her because she's got an annoying voice and
she,
you know what I mean, like
she like physically, and I'm not trying to be like sexist, but she is cut from the same cloth of Hillary Clinton. She, did kind of come from a political background and, wears pantsuits, similar haircut, older white woman. It was very easy to sort of.
So she's a bitch.
Well, I don't think there's anyone aside from Hillary Clinton that better represents the Democratic establishment than Nancy Pelosi. And I say that because the second she was appointed as, the first female speaker of the House, she instantly became one of the most polarizing figures in American politics. She has spawned so much controversy for the Democrats that I really don't know why they're keeping her as not in the Senate, but as the representative of our side of the aisle, or that side of the aisle.
But that's the point I tried to make earlier. I'm a big fan of Nancy Pelosi. Do I think her time has come and maybe it's time to get new blood? I actually do, but not because of why everyone thinks. One, I just think Democrats need to move into a more empowering, sort of younger movement with their new elected officials. But again, Republicans, I would not be surprised. I mean, I'm sure they actually did create a game plan. Let's go after Nancy Pelosi. Let's make her a scapegoat for Republican issues and try to make a divide within the Democratic Party. Nancy Pelosi is, in my opinion, and sure, obviously everyone can have a differentiating opinion, but Nancy Pelosi was instrumental in a lot of the progressive ideals that came under the Obama administration. She was key in the stimulus package and even helping bail out the banks, which is a polarizing issue, but we are where we are today because of that. I think Democrats have allowed themselves to be brainwashed by Republicans to think that Nancy Pelosi is hurting their party.
I disagree with you. I think looking at the 2016 election, Nancy Pelosi had so many town halls on MSNBC and CNN, and there were a lot of times where like a young college student or a millennial would stand up and ask her opinion on raising the minimum wage or healthcare. Are you in favor of a multi-payer system or a single-payer system? And she has consistently been behind on all of these progressive issues. And she finally comes around when she realizes the majority of her own party is in favor of it. But she's not a champion of progressive causes anymore. She might have been in 2008, but not anymore. Because the Democratic Party has moved so much farther to the left in those 10 years.
I think part of that, she allowed herself to be brainwashed into what she needs to do instead of sticking to her own guns. If Democrats had the balls and were willing to play hardball like we were, I don't understand why we don't go after someone like Paul Ryan or Mitch McConnell is just the fattest target you could ever imagine. I mean,
he's a turtle.
The guy actually looks like a tortoise.
But what? So you attack the Republican establishment. How does that hurt Trump's chances of winning in 2020? Because Trump supporters are not with the Republican establishment right now. And if you create an even bigger divide in Republicans, Trump's going to have an even bigger army, you know?
That's one of the struggles that I think about often when I think about politics. Republicans have been playing hardball, since the end of the Bush administration.
Before that.
Before, but I mean, like, since Obama, it has been so blatant. I mean, you look at the Neil Gorsuch nomination, you look at the ridiculous amount of filibusters that came under the Obama administration by
Ted Cruz telling fucking bedtime stories.
I just think when you look at how much they played hardball, in all honesty, I give them props to the extent that they're winning. They got that Supreme Court nomination with Neil Gorsuch. They stopped Obama from doing a lot of things that the majority of the American public wanted. We still don't have, universal background checks for guns. Not because their voters don't want that, because their voters do.
An overwhelming majority of their voters.
Even Republican voters want universal background checks. But they play hardball. And my issue that I struggle with all the time is I want Democrats to grow a pair and play hardball back. Because I think there's, games to be won by doing that. But that comes with a serious side effect of only widening the divide between the two parties. And I think when you have both parties playing hardball, then if you think what's happening now with Trump is bad, with how far right those people are, I just think it could get infinitely worse when you have both sides bending the rules in their favor. I mean, that's where you really start to get into corruption, in my opinion.
Like a mantra of the Democratic Party is, when they go low, we go high.
Exactly.
We represent the adults in the country.
The moral authority.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of that, but we keep losing. I'm not advocating playing hardball because I do see that I think long term it would be really bad for our country. Obviously, what I want is Republicans to play a little bit more fair.
But I think right now the left is kind of the backbone of decency in American politics in the Trump administration, like in his presidency. And if we start going down that road, think about where politics in America is going to be in 10 years.
Exactly.
If people get as divisive and as nasty with their rhetoric that Trump is doing right now, it's going to be a fucking shit show.
Yeah.
In 2024,
Both parties have a lot they need to think about. Like, I know that the left is trying to figure out, like, if they want to take on that moral superiority role, you got to understand that very air that they give off is what makes people hate them so fucking much, that they think they're always right, and, like, they don't consider that people might have different beliefs than them, even though that might not necessarily be true. That is the stereotype. And having that attitude kind of contributes to that. And then you have, like, a lot of people on the left, and I think there's not as many of them, but they kind of have the loudest voices that are professing some very, very dangerous far left ideologies. And I think they suck too, because that's the picture that people on the right, like Republican, like, backing and right-leaning media tries to paint the left in that light.
That's another issue with technology, is you get one videotape of a rioter at Berkeley burning something, and immediately, overnight, that's the face of left-wing politics in America.
That's the Bernie Sanders crowd, according to Fox News.
Yep, they're going to burn things and turn us into a communist dictatorship.
I in no way support Antifa. Not even a little bit. I mean, obviously, the idea of being anti-fascist is a good thing, but
everyone's anti-fascist. You're not breaking any new ground there.
Exactly. That's
people are going to listen to this and they're going to say, oh yeah, well, the same thing happens with the right. You get one white supremacist, and immediately that's the face of Republican politics. But what I would say to disagree with that is you literally have racist rhetoric coming out of the White House. So how do you not connect the dots between those white supremacists and the people in the person in the Oval Office? And people on the left, like, you don't see Bernie Sanders advocating for violence or anything of that sort. You don't see any left-wing politician advocating for Antifa.
The right tries to equate Antifa being to the left what the KKK is to the right. Now, obviously, there are very, very few, probably not any outside of Trump, right-wing politicians who in any way embrace the KKK.
Maybe Jeff Sessions.
Maybe Jeff Sessions. He might be a card-holding member. But, joking.
Did they give
Kind
him
of.
cards?
I think
It's kind
so.
of a
I think
funny
it is a
side
thing.
note.
I think you
It's like an
have
NRA
ID.
type thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
This guy I work with, you could order them online. I kind of want to get one. They have like your name and like a 7-digit number. And it looks like a social security card. And it's like just says white privilege on it, and like your full name.
That's pretty
The
funny.
guy said like he got the cops called on him. He like lives in like a nice neighborhood, so someone called the police because his dog wasn't on a leash.
Classic white neighborhood thing.
Wait,
Yeah.
is he white?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So this Hispanic cop comes. He's like, yeah, we got a call about your dog not being on a leash. It's like, yeah, but this is my property. He's like, oh, okay. So they're just talking, like shooting the shit. He's like, I got to show you something. And he shows the cop the white privilege card. And I guess the guy like completely lost it. Like,
The cop did?
Yeah, the cop thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen in his life.
I mean, he probably admitted it. Like, yeah, I knew you weren't any harm.
Well, the guy obviously didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like, you have a dog running around in your own fucking property.
Yeah, but then again, literally last week, there was the dude in California who was in his own backyard. His kids were inside.
A black gentleman.
Yeah, a black guy, father of 2, in his backyard. I don't know why the cops responded, but the cops were there, pulled out his cell phone. They thought it was a crowbar. They shot him 20 times. 20 times in his own backyard for pulling a cell phone out of his
This is in
pocket.
California?
Yep.
This is LA?
Last week. I don't know where.
If you think it's a crowbar, why do you have a gun?
You don't gotta shoot
Yeah.
him. Like, what the fuck?
One, shooting him 20 times, if you don't think
It was-
there's race involved in that.
I'm not sure it was 20. It was like 15 to 20, somewhere in that
anything
range.
past 1, there's race involved. But if you're a cop, you have a gun, you have a taser, you have mace. If the guy, I assume he was probably like at least a couple feet away. If he had a crowbar, he just brought a crowbar to a gunfight. Why did you need to fire a bullet? There was probably a second cop. I didn't read the article. I assume there was at least a second cop around. But even if it was just one.
Well, I mean,
Why-
there would need to be because he would need to put in multiple clips of ammunition.
Yeah, I don't think he was that racist that he took the time to, change his magazine and fill him up with even more lead. But that's the thing. There's always the excuse of, oh, he pulled out a cell phone, we thought it was a gun. The fact that they admitted they thought it was a crowbar, why did they shoot him? I mean, seriously.
That's just stupid. Why don't
That
you
is
just
just
lie and just say you thought it was a gun?
Exactly. At the very least, one, if you think a cell phone is a crowbar, that just sounds like complete bullshit. But if the guy actually had a crowbar, all it takes is for you to point your gun at him, and that guy knows that he lost. And then if he actually had a crowbar and charged you and swung, then, shoot him. But I would prefer maybe mace or a taser. Makes the most sense in that situation. That people who deny prejudice and racism in these situations, if everything is true about this article, which I have seen, I don't understand how you can look at this story and not truly wonder what is happening in our police department.
Let's forget. I mean, I'm completely agree with you that race is definitely involved. But let's just hypothetically take race out of the question and think about how many fucked up things. Using your gun should be a last resort. You ever look into what the military they're in combat, not with other citizens, enemy combatants, their rules of engagement. If you ever actually read into all the protocol, they're like, oh, I would have fucking shot them, shot those terrorists way before step 5. Think about that though. If you shoot him 20 times, you shoot him to kill.
Yeah.
You're not trying to immobilize him, and make an arrest. You're trying to kill him, and he didn't have a weapon on him that could kill you from a distance, so you use that to your advantage. Like, everything about that entire situation is, like, beyond fucked up.
That brings up something we talked about earlier today, which you guys kind of had some counterpoints or disagreements on me with. I still just don't understand, and obviously it's not a perfect equation of the two situations. Why is it that it feels like every month, or at least every month or couple of months, there is an unarmed black man who gets shot and murdered in a traffic stop or in his backyard, but it just seems like all of these white psychopath kids who shoot up schools or movie theaters, they're always apprehended alive. With Nicholas Cruz in the Florida shooting, this kid ran around with an AR-15, killed 17 people, injured many more. How is he captured alive? I mean, seriously, if there is a time for a cop to unload a full magazine, that is it. I'm not saying the cop should, but even if Nicholas Cruz dropped the AR and put his hands up, I don't know if I give a shit if the cop puts a couple rounds in him, even one in the head, in that situation.
Or at least, like, I'm putting the cuffs on him and beating the fuck out of him before I put him in the police car.
But how is it that this unarmed black man in his own backyard got shot because cops thought he had a crowbar, but Nicholas Cruz, who took an AR-15 and murdered 17 people in a public high school, was apprehended alive?
So I'm reading a article by The Guardian on the shooting. It was 20 times. And it says that Clark, who was the victim, allegedly turned towards them and began advancing towards them while holding an object which was extended from him. This is a direct quote from the police officer that shot him. And believing that the object was a gun and saying that they feared for their lives, officers fired at Clark multiple times. They fired a total of 20 shots and then handcuffed him after he was obviously dead, beginning life-saving efforts.
They handcuffed him?
They handcuffed him.
So they knew they fucked up.
Who the fuck fires 20 rounds? Let's say it was 2 cops, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, let's say 10 rounds each cop. Who the fuck fires 10 rounds? I assume at least one hit this gentleman and then decides, oh, let's put these cuffs on him before we make life-saving efforts. Again, when the article you just read stated he was clearly dead.
The more repulsive aspect of this is the article says both of the officers involved in the shooting were wearing body cameras, and there is additional audio and video footage from the sheriff's helicopter. However, even with this footage, the officers involved in the shooting have only been placed on paid leave. Like that should be immediate expulsion and immediate investigation and possible court case.
I can
take right or wrong out of it.
I understand taking time to get the answers.
I think it's pretty obvious if you have two body camera footage.
But it does not take long to watch body camera footage or just walk up to that man's dead body and see that he had, 20 more bullet holes in him than he should have in that situation. And the fact that he had a cell phone or whatever it was clearly wasn't a gun.
Like, I think, immediately terminate the officers and then do the investigation to see if, what kind of criminal charges are we putting against them? Just for PR purposes.
In the crazy scenario that those 20 shots and the murder of that man were warranted, then obviously, you can compensate those officers for the lost paid hours or that kind of thing. But again, that was not this case.
All right, so I think we're going to leave it at that for tonight. If you guys, the audience I'm talking to, if you guys have any comments on what we were talking about or any disagreements, feel free to drop a comment below. We'll hopefully get back onto some of these topics in the next episode. But yeah, thanks for listening and see you soon.